I won't go deeply, but there is something interesting. Remember this equation of motion, n times epsilon ijk xj xk dot divided by I think you know this equation. Okay, there is something, this n is E times G, okay, where E is say particle or charge E, G is particle of monopole or charge G, right, and X is relative coordinate. And this n is quantized. Okay, so n is quantized. Now something happened later due to Zwanziger and Schwinger, where they talked about dyons. I'll tell you why I am talking about dyons. So here you have E1 G1, so a particle has both electric and magnetic charges, and another one with E2 G2. Okay, in this case the force here, okay, for E1 G this equation, okay, RHS of 1, okay, for say E1 G2 is going to be equal to this is going to be equal to, I have given n, so it's going to be E1 G2 divided by whatever it is, E1 G2 times dot 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 dot, right, the Eg over 4 pi. It will be E1 G2 over 4 pi dot dot dot. For 2, okay, it will be E2 G1 over 4 pi, right, because it is between this and that, but okay, one changes sign, RHS, no sorry, left hand side changes sign, because the relative coordinate has flipped in sign, right. So what happens is, implying that m xi double dot, where x, this is the relative coordinate between this and this, okay, is equal to E1 G2 minus E2 G1 over 4 pi times dot 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 dot. Okay, so this is changed character. Okay, this is a antisymmetric product of E1 and G2, E1 G1 and E2 G2. In fact, it is a symplectic product of the two things, right? Epsilon I. So this is what you get. So what you are going to get is E1 G2 minus E2 G1 over 4 pi is going to be in integer, not E and G. Okay, this doesn't mean, for example, if I have no, this means, for suppose now consider, for example, okay, say E1 G1 equal to 0, so it's a pure charge, and you consider magnetic monopole, something with electric charge and also monopole charge. Okay, and apply this condition, you will find that G2, even G2 over 4 pi is integral. Even G2 over, it does not say anything about E2, right? No condition on E2 at all. This is, in this case, is completely unrestrained. Okay. Here, now what Witten did was to notice that this charge here is not restricted at all because of this for dions. Then he considered what happens, okay, if I now do something different. Okay. So suppose I have this condition here, okay, assume this, okay. So assume, okay, there is a pure charge, okay, E1 0, which implies G1 G2 E2, okay, where no, I should be careful, E2 G2, where G2 is quantized. Is some integer. Now suppose there is another one, suppose there is another monopole, okay, suppose there is another dion, assume another dion, okay, with E1 prime and G2. He assumes. Now what happens between these? So between these you will find that E1 minus E2, E1 prime, what am I saying? This should be E2, sorry, I am writing too fast, okay. This should be E2, this is E2 prime. So you get E2 minus E2 prime, right, between these two, okay. E2 G2 minus G2 E2 prime, okay. So it is G2 over 4 pi is quantized, right. So what happens is that if I have in this situation like this, the difference between the dionic charges is quantized, but each can be shifted by, so okay, we can have E2, okay, some integer, E2 is some E2 0 plus some psi, okay, where E2 0 is quantized as above. And psi is a common universal factor, okay. So you could have dions of fractional charge. So this is the thing about Witten's dions of fractional charge. And QCD theta vacuum. Okay. He argues that this situation is actually comes about if you go into QCD, okay, in the case of theta, in the actually says theta charge, okay, in presence of theta vacua. I have not talked about it. That is, if you take the ad hoc monopole model and go to theta vacua with some which I have not talked about, he argues that the dions in that model, that is a ad hoc Polyakov model, but with charge also, you will find that the charge is not quantized, but it has a non-quantized part which depends on this the angle theta. which defines the vacuum. Okay. So I want to draw your attention to this result, okay, that the quantization condition changes ferrions, okay, which was known already to Zwanziger and Schwinger, but it has this consequence, and I think that the existence of the symplectic product, okay, if I take this vector, what you are finding is this kind of thing, qi q prime j is z, right, where epsilon is the antisymmetric symbol. It is epsilon is 0 1 minus 1 0, right. This is what we are finding. I think that this is very strongly related to the Goddard-Noyes-Olive duality, which you might have heard about. I will just mention it. There is this fact that there is electric and magnetic groups. Okay. There is an old conjecture due to Goddard, Olive, and Noyes, and Monthorner and Olive, which is believed to be realized in some particular supersymmetric models, okay, n equal to 4 supersymmetry, and recently, I mean 10 years, it has also connected to all this business about Langland's program. Okay. So this my mind is not clear on how this gets related to that, but it looks very much probable, okay, to me. Let me see. Okay. So if you have questions, please ask. Okay. There is something to be done, to be understood, but I want to now to look at the abelian Chern-Simons theory. So I am going to go into quantum field theory, and this will bring out some of the interesting aspects, okay, of treatment of constraints in quantum field theory, which is highly non-trivial. Okay. So I consider abelian, let me call it Chern-Simons. Okay. So it is, you may remember that the action is the following. I think is k, this is some overall constant times, okay, d cubed x, okay, epsilon ijk, ai ijk, ai aj d ai dj ak, right. I am working in 3 dimensions, and I will deliberately use a topology del cross r. That is, I will not consider all a space. So the spatial slice will be a disk. Well, looks like a disk, let us say a circular disk. Does not matter whether I write as a circle or whatever, because this object has no metric. Okay. This is my whole action. Now I want to know how to quantize this system, okay, and we will see that let me just get the facts right. Yeah, that this story is not trivial. Okay. We will see that the treatment of the constraints here in this problem is quite non-trivial, and I want to show you how it goes. Okay. Now look at the action. Yes, it is k over 4 pi times what, d cubed x times, first there is a a0 term, okay. Huh?
Can I make a comment about your comment?
Yeah.
So if you take solving under some system order,
Uh.
central vector,
It is invariant. Yes, invariant. I know.
And then quantization implies that the group is broken up as a Z.
Yes.
It's simply the S duality.
Yes. So it looks like, yeah, it is. I completely agree with you. Okay,
Because
but
one of the S duality invariants. I don't know if there are more.
this I do not know. But what I was trying to understand is, if you go back, which I did just this morning also, to Goddard Olive noise problem, they write down the general quantization condition in a slightly different way. You say what? They get the quantization condition as a statement that there is some charge vector beta as many as the rank of the Lie group. Okay. Then they are writing beta I times the Cartan generators. These are the Cartan generators, and there is a condition like this one exponentiated is 1 in the group. Okay. Yeah. So actually this thing is evaluated, so let me, yeah, this thing is evaluated in the adjoint representation. Now this they call charge, whichever way it is, and this they call the magnetic charge. This they call electric charges, magnetic charges, and you can see that this being 1 is some condition on, to exchange the two, the spectrum of this in adjoint representation. So this will be the weight, this will be the root vectors of this will be the weight vectors. If you exchange them, nothing happens. Okay. This statement I am unable to put properly here. I know that the right G over H you get here has the form of a symplectic manifold, is a scalar manifold. You can easily show is scalar, and it has a symplectic form. But I don't know, understand what is the relation of their statements to this statement. But I believe there is, and it is called Langlands duality. It is related to this Langlands duality. Okay. So we will be deeply entering this number theory problems, which I thought would be fascinating, but I got stuck. Okay. Now, but your remark is absolutely good, because this epsilon is this SL2 will, determinant is 1 for SL2, so the epsilon is invariant. Okay. So any SL2 transformation, what he is saying is, if I take this EG and I apply any 2 by 2 transformation where this S belongs to SL2R, right? This thing is not changed, but there is a quantization condition. So this has to become SL2Z. This is what people call as the S duality in string theory. Okay? That's absolutely correct. Okay? But it is implicit already in this work of old work of Schwinger and Zwanziger. Okay? So here, if you look at this expression here, there are two things. Okay? One is you get epsilon AB, let me call it DAAB, right, plus another term, okay, which comes from D0. So let me write epsilon AB, AA D0 AB. I am just splitting the equation. Now you can see from here by inspection that we get first, the way it is written, A0 has no canonical momentum. Okay. So what happens, as in the Gauss law case, by inspection, okay, that you get constrained. This one, epsilon AB, A and B are running over 1 and 2, DAAB is weakly 0. Okay. Furthermore, from this equation here you will find it is like P dq, right, P dq. So from here, and there are two terms, so immediately you get Poisson bracket of AA of x, AB of y is equal to, I think it's k over 2 pi, I will check it, the Poisson bracket epsilon AB times delta 2 of xy, okay, at equal times. I just want to get the factors right. There should be 2 pi over k. It has to be inverted because we want, I must absorb this factor in one of the a's because p dq, okay. So this is p dq minus q dp, so there is a factor 2, okay. So I have fixed all that, okay, and this is a commutation relation at equal times, okay. So the system consists only of this. The equations of motion will give you nothing because if you Legendre transform, you will get it weakly 0. I can do the analysis, but the point is, when I Legendre transform, this will give nothing because it's p dq, first order in time, okay. Whereas this one, which is like a potential, is 0. So the whole thing is, if you just Legendre transform, you will get 0, okay, except for the constraint. Now, is this problem, now what is the non-triviality of this problem? Let me go back to this 1 and 2, okay. Now we see that from 2 already, so in quantum theory, let me look at quantum theory or Poisson, well, I am going to get again epsilon AB dA AB is weakly 0, and I have to understand what this is 1 prime. Then I am going to get this actual bracket AA of x, AB of y is going to be I 2 pi over k epsilon AB delta 2 of xy, okay. Now 1 prime, so this is 2 prime. 1 prime already has a problem because from 2 prime shows that this A in any, like in any quantum field theory, AA are not operators. On a Hilbert space. C RHS, okay. There is a delta function here. Delta function is no operator on anything, it is a distribution. So it is an operator value distribution, okay. That is, so it is an operator valued distribution, okay. So I had to smear it with test functions to get anything sensitive. So I go back to 1 prime, okay. 1 prime involves a derivative. So if your derivatives are distributions, but in 1 prime there are derivatives of distributions. Right? But the only way to understand them as is by using test functions and transfer the derivatives to test functions. So must be understood okay by smearing with test functions and partially degrading. call it like test function lambda. Okay, so I will write g of lambda, which I will write as sign is less important. Where is the constraint 1 prime? That is there. So I will write this as k over 4 pi, k over, well, it does not matter. So it is, I will write this as epsilon AB, okay, times d2x times dA of lambda d AB is 0, okay, weakly 0, but lambda is a test function and this is integrated now on the disk. But what class of test functions do I, but what class of test functions do I choose? Okay, it is not clear a priori. Okay. So, but let me assume now to recover classical equation which I will call this one, this epsilon AB dA AB equal to 0. I should be able to, if I treat this for a minute as classical equation, not in classical physics, not as generator of canonical transformations, but as just an ordinary function, we require immediately, is very, we will see that require lambda on the boundary is 0. Okay. People doing Poisson bracket will get this condition by requiring what they call differentiability of constraints. Okay, that is, if you vary the constraint with regard to the potentials, okay, you should get no boundary terms. Okay. So they will. Where you go? There is some, yeah. I am trying to see how I see it here. Yeah, they will actually they will start with this object, smear it with test functions, and vary A, okay, and require that when you do the variation, you get no boundary terms. Okay, you can do partial integration, which will again give you the same condition. Okay, but I have tried to use purely operatorial statements. I tried, and I end up with this one. Okay, so the Gauss law is the following thing, which I will call G of lambda is this thing, epsilon AB dA of lambda AB, where d2x, okay, where lambda vanishes at the boundary. Okay. We put some condition on lambda at the boundary. Now, is this, what happens? Are G lambda first class? That is to say, is it true that G of lambda 1, G of lambda 2? What happens to this? Yeah. Do they close? Let us see what happens. Is epsilon AB, okay, dA lambda. Okay, I am commuting. Okay, so AB, then I will get d epsilon CD, dC of call this lambda 1, call this lambda 2, AD, and I am commuting. Okay, but this commutator we know, AB with A, this is D. This with this we know, so this is equal to epsilon AB, and here there are two integrations, d2x, d2y. This is x and there is, say one of them is x and the other is y. So it is epsilon AB, dA of lambda 1 of x, epsilon CD, dC lambda 2 of y, epsilon lambda 2 of y, then between these epsilon BD delta 2 xy and d2x d2y. I hope I got all the, so get BD, so delta AC, is it true? I should not get, I should get that, I should get, let me see, I will tell you the answer I should get. I should simply get d lambda 1 wedge d lambda 2 on D. So I should get the, let me see, A and C should be antisymmetrized. BD is correct, what I got. This epsilon BD, okay. So this with this will give me delta AD, okay. So you get delta CA, so you get antisymmetrization. So this is this is proportional to epsilon AB dA of lambda 1 dB of lambda 2 d2x. This epsilon will hit this to produce a delta, leaving one epsilon which antisymmetrizes these two. So you get this. Okay. But this is nothing but by partial integration and Stokes theorem is 0, right? So this is nothing but d lambda 1 wedge d lambda 2. Partial integration is 0 has lambda, say anyone lambda 1 say vanishes at boundary. So when I partially integrate I get 0. So this is G is from a first class system, okay. So this implies G lambda first class. Okay. Now let me do another thing. In this model there are charges. We should see that even the definition of electric charge arises out of a mechanism like this. What are the charges? I will define them by, it looks exactly like the constraint, but the test function space is changed. Okay. So I define this to be q mu. It will look exactly like what I did, d2x, okay. Epsilon AB, dA of mu AB, okay, where okay, mu at the boundary need not vanish. May vanish, need not vanish. This object is also well defined because I have provided some technical issue doesn't arise which does not here, as smearing a operator value distribution with a test function. I am not taking derivatives of, by the way, people doing this kind of activity call them as weak equations. Okay. Even when you solve partial differential equations, okay, they don't think of those equations like something active on ordinary functions. They take all the derivatives and put it on test functions, they smear them. Okay. Even in ordinary elliptic differential equations on a disk, in electrostatics, if you look at Keshavan's book, you will find this all over the place. Okay. So it is in that sense, so these are called weak equations, and we are dealing with weak equations. Now first thing is, okay, is Q mu 1 an observable, is gauge invariant? Okay, that is it gauge invariant? So for that we have to check whether Q mu with G lambda, I have to commute. That for that I can use this formula. Okay. Until now I have not used any partial integration, so I will get up to i's. Okay. Actually there is some I. I am going to get epsilon AB, okay, dA of mu, dB of lambda, okay, d2x from above. I think I k over 2 pi and so on, 2 pi over k. I am not sure about 2 pi over k. I am writing here k over 2 pi. Let me follow the rules. Okay. Sorry? There are some, I will tell you why you are right. K out. I know the reason is in the constraint, the definition, there is a Q out, here there is a K over 2 pi, okay, and G has another K over 2 pi, that cancels this, okay, so this is another K over 2 pi in the definition, okay. So I am normalizing G of lambda, okay, as Q of lambda. Well, the way I write like this, so there is a 2k over 2 pi. This is for purely convention. Now this is 0, okay, because lambda vanishes the boundary. Okay, so it is first class. So yes, it is. So there is some algebraic structure left over at the end of the game. What is it? Okay. It's gauge invariant. There is no difference here. I mean, we don't know that all first class constraints are gauge transformations. In this case, yes. So in this case there is no problem. But we don't know, I don't know, that all first class constraints generate gauge transformations.
I thought it was important that lambda vanished on the boundary for G to be
a constraint.
Since mu doesn't have to vanish.
No.
Q of mu doesn't have to vanish.
No.
So it's an observable.
It is an observable. Is it non-trivial? We have to understand. Okay. Now, Q mu is an edge observable. Okay. Why? For if two test functions agree on the boundary, okay, then Q of mu1 minus mu2 it vanishes at the boundary. Okay. So this is a so where mu1 2 is a lambda, so this is 0. Okay. So all that is left here, so this is an edge observable, because what the way you extend the test function to the bulk makes no difference. Can be completely parameterized by the value of the test function at the boundary, but you cannot fix a gauge. Okay, there is no way that I can. So what you have got is the equivalence class of all mu's modulo functions will vanish at the boundary. What is that quotient? The quotient is not. How will you take a quotient? That equivalence class you cannot. There is no section in that equivalence class. Namely, take all functions. So if you take, this is like saying the following. Suppose I have some region, a space. You take all functions on the space, okay, and take all functions which vanish at a point. Okay. What is the quotient of all functions on space modulo all functions at that point? Okay. What is something that is sitting there? Okay. But what is it? There is no such thing in the space of all functions. There is no such thing, okay, which has some value here and nowhere else. Okay. There is no such thing. Okay. So you cannot take a quotient. Now what is Q of mu1? Also, let me look at Q of mu1 with Q of mu2. We have this master formula again. So it is going to be I k over 2 pi on disk, okay, times d mu1 h d mu2. But it is no longer 0, because this is equal to I k over 2 pi of mu1 h d mu2, right, mu1 d mu2. Okay, not need not, it's not 0 always. So we are suddenly finding something sitting at the edge, okay, which is a non-trivial algebra. They don't even, it is some, it looks like a Heisenberg algebra, but not quite. I'll tell you what this algebra is actually. Yeah. So what is this algebra? So question is, what is this algebra? Call it alpha. What is alpha? So let me show you. Okay. Suppose on boundary, okay, we have a massless scalar field phi, okay, and this canonical conjugate and this momentum phi dot, okay. So I am assuming that at the boundary, just I want to see how to get a representation of this theory. So I am writing f of x, phi dot of y is a I times, let me write it as theta prime delta of theta minus theta prime, okay, at fixed time. Where I have parameterized the boundary with an angle. Okay. This is a massless scalar field. This is a commutation relation of a massless scalar field. Now, let me consider right or left movers. So I'll write phi plus minus of theta, which is let me write carefully. This is phi dot plus or minus phi prime of theta. If you can put, if you want, you can put velocity factors. Never mind. Okay. As you well know, a relativistic massless scalar field phi, this equation you cannot. It is not possible to quantize because of infrared divergence. But this phi dot and phi prime you can quantize. This is this result of Coleman, that there is no phase transition into 1 plus 1 space time, okay? Because a massless scalar field like phi does not exist in one space and one time. You will get divergences like in the, when you write mode expansion, you will get terms like dk over k, okay? And that has a logarithmic divergence. So all correlators start diverging for this phi. Okay? But if you take phi dot and phi prime, is okay. They are the currents. So these are the left and right moving currents I am writing. Then you check that the following equation is trivial, that mu1 of theta, okay, I am writing, say, this should not be written, it should be written like this, t plus minus, sorry, should be d plus minus. Then you write d plus minus phi of theta, mu2 of theta prime, well, theta prime, d plus minus of phi of theta prime equal to plus or minus 2 times mu1 of theta d mu2 of theta. This is on the boundary d theta. See, theta is going from 0 to 2 pi. So the left and right movers commute. Left gives you one sign, right gives you the other sign, and you get this. This is the same as this up to factors. Okay. So the algebra we are getting is the algebra of an abelian current algebra. Okay. So we are getting an abelian current algebra at the boundary. So we are getting an abelian current algebra U1, current algebra or a Casabutti algebra on the disk. Okay. That is all that is left. The representation theory of this system, okay, is a representation theory of this massless particle, and there are some fluctuations going on at the edge, okay, and these are the fluctuations. These are used to describe Hall effect, quantum Hall effect. Let me I'll come back to this for a minute, for a minute, but let me just so the treatment of the constraint has proved to be very important. Okay? If you don't treat it correctly, you lose everything. Okay? Now, it is also true that now we can do the following. Okay? Now label Q's by the boundary values of its stress functions. Is 1 plus 1 dimensional field theory. It's sitting in the edge.
It's like R cross D.
Of course, time is there. Okay. time is also there. If I had done this same calculation by putting in the non-abelian Chern-Simons, you would get the full Cosmodee algebra of the SUN or whatever it is, along with the central term, because what we are getting here is exactly the central term. Okay, if you may know, let me write down, you will see what I am saying. Okay. So let me write the following. Okay. So then you find set Qn as Q for the test function exponential I n theta. The way you extend this in the bulk is immaterial, you do what you like, because there are 0 quantum states by the constraint. Okay. So I can label the modes purely by the boundary values, and since I have chosen a boundary which looks like a circle, diffeomorphic to a circle, I can use the Fourier modes. Okay. And I can calculate this commutators Q and Qm and I get n times k times delta n plus m yeah, k is in the delta n plus m0. Okay, this is the same equation I wrote. Okay, you remember I wrote mu2, this equation here. Okay, the extra I comes from this d mu2, and the Fourier transform gives another 2 pi which cancels this, and sine I think is okay. So this is the, we know how to solve this. These are the creation and annihilation operators of a massless scalar at the boundary. Okay, after you take the derivative, so you take the phi prime, not a scalar phi, exploit it in the usual way, but take phi prime and write commutators, you will get this. Okay, so this is giving you, this is abelian Cosmodee. Now, once I come up to this, okay, one can now start elaborating on this much more. Okay. For example, you can do have a Virasoro construction in this framework. Okay. Can I write the diffeomorphism generators using this? Can I write vertex generators? You can have, there's a whole bunch of things which people do who do Cosmodee, and it turns out that you can do all that. Okay. And this part we did long ago, and you can look at it. Okay. But what I want to do now is to sidestep this problem, okay, and apply it, these ideas, to, let's say, to ED in 3+1. Now here, so the question is, in QED in 3+1, yeah, the Gauss law is a constraint. So what I mean by this is, this object here, divergence of EI, electric field, okay, plus the current J0 is weakly 0. Where E is electric field, J0 is a current. But again the problem arises, in quantum theory we have to write this in terms of test functions. Okay. interpreting using test functions again, because E's are not operators, they are distributions, okay, operator valued distributions. So I'll write Gauss law in a different way, minus di lambda ai ei plus lambda j0, and this is weakly 0, provided lambda at the boundary, okay, at infinity, lambda goes to 0 as sufficiently fast. Otherwise, if I don't put this, you will not get the classical Gauss law equation, because I will not be able to do partial integration here. So the requirement of classicality, I am making a, at least I don't know of a better argument, let me put it this way. I want to put conditions on lambda at infinity, and the only way people doing symplectic geometry, like Abhay for example, they will look at differentiability of this one smeared with lambda, and they will find that this lambda must go to 0 at infinity, okay. But using some activity with symplectic geometry, in proper definition of Poisson brackets. Here I am just using the fact that these are operators, so I better write that as in this way. But once I write this, I want to also recover the classical equations, so I require that this lambda goes to 0 at infinity, okay. So I get this. So this is the form of the Gauss law. But what is charge? Charge again is, it is q mu, but it looks exactly the same, okay. It is exactly the minus di mu ei plus mu j0, right. Mu at infinity, okay, say normally we take mu goes to constant at infinity. So again you can take any constant value. I'll tell you why I am taking constant, why don't I make it angle dependent, I'll come to that, okay. But this is what we normally do, and acting on fields, all that matters is the asymptotic value because of that condition. So this is a charge operator, okay. You can check easily that Q commutes at G, okay. Okay. In this case Q mu G lambda is actually weakly 0, okay, and in this case also Q mu, the abelian case Q mu prime is weakly 0, is 0, because it is in the non-abelian case you will get the non-abelian algebra. If you start putting topological terms in your action, you will start getting things here in this commutator. So this is your charge situation, okay. Now in the literature you find people making big confusion by taking this equation and writing charge as E dot ds at infinity. E dot ds at infinity has no meaning in quantum theory because you cannot commute it with anything, okay. It's not an operator on anything, okay. So this mixture of classical and quantum ideas, in my opinion, can only lead to big masala, okay. But this I think is the correct way, okay, of doing this, okay. This is what you find in the certain of the literature, okay. So now I want to say finally today's thing that the same thing happens in quantum gravity. because in the quantum gravity case, okay, the diffure constraints I won't write the test functions vanish at infinity. Okay, same. Whereas okay, the ADM generators, these are the ones which generate the Poincare group, do not test functions do not go to 0 at infinity. So depending on the test function you choose, you can generate the full Poincare group, okay, rotations, everything you can generate, and these are the ones which people talk about when they talk about the mass of the black hole, okay, using the ADM formula. It is not a diffuse motion constraint, okay, but this is sitting at infinity, just like the charge is a super selection operator. Charge is not a part of the local observables, just like those things are not part of the local observables. Okay. So I finished. If I choose, well, there is a story. You can ask, why don't I make mu space-time dependent, time angular dependent at infinity? Okay. It turns out that if you do that and allow that as an observable in the system, then it turns out that that charge operator, where mu goes to angle dependent things at infinity, breaks Poincare invariance, rotational invariance. Okay. I mean, you find that the rotation operator does not act properly on states which the charge operator creates from the vacuum. Okay. So you are breaking rotation and more pure. Who have checked that in the presence of infrared divergences, infrared effects, Poincare group is in fact broken. Okay. That is, you cannot implement them on the states associated to this huge number of infrared photons, and this appears to be a way of creating those states. So some of us are now trying to, I think we have some way of setting up models where we can make actually calculations and predict the violation of Poincare invariance, where we include this angular dependent factors. Okay. But the setup is there, but we have not had time to do the computations. Okay. So I can go delve more deeply, but what I wanted to do next time was something which is again relevant, namely this extra dimension. You may know that in the Wess-Zumino-Witten models you get extra dimensions, right? Where does it come from? What on earth is that? Okay. So I will show how it comes about. It has a very simple physical origin, very simple mathematical origin, and I will show you and how the calculations can be done there. Okay. So in fact you can even do canonical methods, provided you understand what it is. Okay. So we will do that, and then we will do something else.